I've got it pulled up, so when I present, Mr. Newman, I'll show
Yeah,
you
that'd be
the
great.
scatter plot.
That'd be great.
Hello there, folks. Mark Vonderow here. I have 4:30 on my computer. We have a published agenda. It is the appropriate time, and I'll call the MUD 46 meeting to order. Brian Yates, are you there?
This is Brian. I'm on the line.
Okay, sir. Let's have your COVID protocol speech, please, sir.
Yes, sir. Welcome. This is Brian Yates with Schwartz Page and Harding. Welcome everybody to the Montgomery County MUD number 46 Board of Directors meeting for Wednesday, January the 20th, 2021. As in prior meetings, I'll go through the meeting procedures for our remote meeting, and then we'll perform a roll call. So to begin with, need to remind everyone the meeting is being recorded as required by the Texas Open Meetings Act. Second, please remember to state your name before you speak, including the making of any motions. When you're not speaking, please be sure to mute your line. Third, we'll continue the practice of having a roll call to vote on each motion. After a motion has been made and seconded, please wait until you hear your name called and then respond with a verbal aye, a nay, or an abstention. Finally, we need to identify each person who's joining the meeting remotely this afternoon so we can accurately reflect the attendance in the minutes of the meeting. I'll perform a roll call for the board members, followed by staff and consultants. When you hear your name or your company called, please respond by indicating that you're present in the meeting. Likewise, if you need to leave the meeting before it adjourns, please announce that you're doing so before you disconnect. Once I've completed the roll call for directors, staff, and consultants, I'll ask for any members of the public to identify themselves for the record. So starting with our board of directors, Mark Vonderow.
Present.
Margie Podjalinski.
Present.
Deidre Eklund.
Here.
George Newman.
Here.
Scott Custer.
Present.
That completes the roll call for our directors. We will move on to Woodlands Water staff. Jim Stinson.
Present.
Mike Mooney.
Present.
Maureen Bourgeois.
Here.
Jeannie Scott.
I'm here.
Shelley Lawson Kennedy.
Present.
Any other Woodlands Water staff members in the meeting? If not, we'll move on to San Jacinto River Authority staff. Ron Kelly.
Present.
Chris Meeks.
Present.
Matt Corley.
Present.
Any other members of San Jacinto River Authority staff in the meeting?
I do not believe so, Brian.
Okay. If not, we will move on to MUD 46 consultants. Do we have any MUD 46 consultants in the meeting?
John Knox, Knox Cox and Company.
And Adam Cohen with Baird.
All right. Any other MUD 46 consultants in the meeting? If not, do we have any developer representatives in the meeting? Okay, we'll move on then to members of the public. Do we have any members of the public present in the meeting? We need to identify you for the record as well. Okay, Maureen, anyone else that has not been identified?
There's one call-in user. I don't see the phone number.
Okay, do we have someone else in the meeting? We need to identify you for the record.
I don't know.
We all.
Okay. Okay, that will complete the roll call. I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Mark to begin the agenda. Thank you.
Mark Vonderow here. Thank you, Brian. I'd like to take a second here. For y'all that don't know, I've been experiencing vertigo for the last almost a year, and I've been having some vertigo issues since about 1 o'clock this afternoon, and followed by probably three of the 4 or 5 symptoms that I have. And I'm going to participate in the meeting, but I'm going to turn it over to Margie to run the meeting without any objections. Margie, you have
I'm
the
ready,
meeting.
Mark. Yeah, I'm here, Mark. I can go ahead for you. No problem.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any comments from the public? I didn't hear anybody from the public on the record, so I don't think we have any. Do we have anybody? Okay, I'm going to skip number 2 then. Number 3, consider an act on request for adjustments. Do we have any adjustments this month?
Hi, Margie. This is Jeannie, and I don't have any.
Okay,
And this is Mike. I have none this month either.
okay. I'm writing that on our sheet. Okay, then we're on the consent agenda for items number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and 11. Anybody have any comments or any of those need to be moved off the consent agenda?
Yeah, this is Scott. Just a change to the minute, would need to amend the minutes slightly.
Okay, do you want to go ahead, Scott? Tell us what we need to do.
Yeah, on the, nuts, I didn't write down the line item. The line item on the vote for the audit funding. Forgive me, I thought I wrote down which one this was. The minutes designate that I abstained and I actually voted nay. Line item 13 in the minutes, forgive me there.
Okay, so number 13, we need to make that correction. Are there any other corrections to the minutes? No? Okay. Shelley, did you get that correction?
I did.
Okay. So do we have a motion from anyone for the consent agenda?
I'll make the motion.
Okay, George makes the motion. Do we have a second?
This is Scott, I'll second it.
Okay, motion by George, second by Scott. All those in favor say aye. Mark, I'm going to call the roll. Mark, how do you vote?
Aye.
I vote aye. Deirdre, how do you vote?
Aye.
Scott, how do you vote?
Aye.
George, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay, so that takes us to the next page in our packet, and that is number 12. And it says review and consider approval of the district's fiscal year 2019-2020 draft audit report. And that was on an insert in our packet. Does anybody want to cover that?
Sorry, had me on my mute. John Knox with Knox Cox and Company. I'd like to
Okay,
make a few comments if I can.
sure, that'd be great. Thank you.
Just to kind of cover some highlights, page 1 is our auditor's opinion, which is unqualified as it should be. If you look at page 12 and 13, that's your statement of activities and governmental funds. We had a significant loss in the general fund for the year, but we were expecting that and actually a good bit of more. I think there was a big budget for the meters that weren't
Get out.
completed.
Sorry, forgive me. That was me talking to my dog. I thought I was on mute. Please forgive me.
No problem. I'll mention on page 32, we added a footnote for the pandemic, just to note to the world that we are aware it's there and we hope it doesn't affect us, but it could. And my last comment is if everybody can take a look at page 48 to make sure names are spelled correctly, terms look right, fees seem reasonable and so forth. And our plan is to file this with the TCEQ before, say, February 13th. And so we've got a couple of weeks. So if everybody wants to, if we have any more comments or changes from Brian or from the board, we're happy to make any additional changes. And if they're minor, I mean, I guess we'd like a motion to approve it subject to any more review.
This is Scott. What are the fees that are being described here?
Those are your
is
fees
the-
of office. Are you looking at 48?
Yeah,
Those are fees of office
okay.
for
So,
the 12 months ended 9/30/20.
okay.
Okay. Okay, do we have any other comments? Then we need a motion to approve this packet, from Knox. Do we have anybody who would like to make the motion?
Mark Vondereau make the motion to approve the audit.
Okay, Mark, you make the motion. I'll second. Okay, let's call. Mark, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay, this is Margie. I vote aye. George, how do you vote?
Aye.
Scott, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Deirdre, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay, so the motion passes. That was number 12. Now we're on number 13. Authorize preparation and submission of district information to Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts as required by section 403.0241 Texas Government Code and chapter 203 Texas Local Government Code for inclusion in the Special Purpose District Public Information Database. Who
This
do we
is
have?
Brian. This is one of our January administrative items. The legislature put this requirement into place a couple of sessions ago. Your auditor, Knox Cox, does take care of this filing on the district's behalf, but we do need a motion to authorize them to take care of the filing for 2021. That deadline is April the 1st.
Okay, do we have someone to make that motion?
I'll make the motion.
Okay,
This is
George,
Mark.
make the motion. Do we have a second?
Mark Vondereau, second.
Okay, George makes the motion, Mark second. Mark, how do you vote?
Aye.
This is Margie. I vote aye. Deirdre, how do you vote? George, how do you vote?
Aye.
And Scott, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay, so the motion passes. We're on number 14. Grant exemption from taxation for 2021 and the adoption of a resolution in connection therewith. This is on page 32 in your packet.
This is Brian. Another one of our January administrative items is to consider exemptions from taxation. The resolution that you have in your packet on 32 and 33 incorporates the same exemptions that were adopted in 2020. Those exemptions include a $20,000 over 65 and disabled exemption and the maximum general residential homestead exemption that's allowed by law, which is 20%. If the board is agreeable to maintaining those same exemptions this year, we would need a motion to adopt the resolution. If the board would like to reconsider those exemption amounts, now would be the time to consider those changes.
And do we have any discussion? No? Okay, well then we just need a motion then to continue what we have.
Mark Vondereau, motion to leave our exemptions as they are.
Okay, Mark, I'll second. This is Margie. Mark, how do you vote?
Aye.
And this is Mark. I vote aye. Deirdre, how do you vote?
Aye.
Scott, how do you vote?
Aye.
George, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay, so the motion passes. We're on number 15, receive the Woodlands Division 2020 static water level report. This is on page 34 in your packet.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening. This is Matt Corley. I'll be presenting this presentation this evening. It is a carryover from last month's meeting. Share my screen.
This is Chris Meeks. While Matt is waiting for his presentation to come up. Matt, did you want to cover the KPI and the MOR real quick?
I will. Yes, sir. So Mr. Custer last month had some questions regarding the financial KPI in the monthly operations report. Should be able to see here. One item to note, our KPIs are kind of middle of the road as far as the AWWA benchmarking goes. Wanted to point out one thing that we do and have removed is our contribution to debt service and R&R. Removing those items put us where we need to be, and it's really comparing more apples to apples. The other thing to point out on the O&M cost on the water side is we're just looking at cost in comparison to the groundwater produced. And we all know we have a 35% surface water, 65% groundwater blend ratio. And so by taking surface water, our costs are not able to be spread out over as much groundwater. So Scott, did that answer your question as far as the KPIs go?
Well, if I remember, the reason I brought it up at the time was that we looked like we were out of benchmark on wastewater.
And
Like we
again,
were-
that the removal of the debt service and
Okay.
R&R allocation puts us more in line.
Okay, and that's consistent with how this benchmark is derived from other, we were just reporting bad data, if you will.
Yeah, and what's difficult is the AWWA benchmark. They come up with a big textbook every year. It's basically done by survey, and so all these utilities submit information via survey, and so it's hard to know what's behind the data. The formula doesn't tell you what costs should be included. And so we're just using our best management in looking at the financials. Like I said, the debt service and the R&R allocation, we pulled those out. It put us in line. And so we feel comfortable with the costs that are included.
Okay. And this is Scott again, just forgive me, but just so I make sure I'm interpreting this correctly, I should compare the monthly column against the benchmarks.
Really fiscal year to date, because those,
Okay.
it's I think gives a more accurate representation of where we're at. Month to month, expenses hit. Some of those expenses, may be for the next quarter.
Okay.
So receiving those expenses in one month may inflate that particular month, but fiscal year to date, everything smooths out.
Okay, and this is Scott again. Everybody else probably got it, but I didn't. Your comment on groundwater versus surface water ratio in terms of impacting this number?
So yes, sir. On the O&M cost for water, we look at the cost in comparison to the groundwater produced. But because we're receiving a blend of surface water, that groundwater total is less than what it would be if we were producing 100% groundwater. And so you have less product to spread your cost out over.
Okay, so we're artificially high because this is only a benchmark for groundwater relative to the other districts.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. It's hard to find a system that fits our business model, if you will.
Okay, that's fair enough. So it's obviously, this is Scott, and we want to be careful how we use the benchmarks. I get it. So that the wastewater was concerning. I understand what you've done to change that. Do you have any concerns or conclusions that you draw after after you've redone this a little bit that we should have our eye on? Or do you think we're
Nothing
in
that
line and looking good?
you can look at the days cash on hand and that, compared to other systems, we're low.
Sure, that's a policy choice. Yeah.
Yeah, but exactly, that's policy.
This is Chris Meeks, just real quick, just to let you know, one thing that we're looking at on the O&M wastewater side, it does not include the R&R, so the major maintenance items, but we do keep an eye on that number there
Mhm.
because that'll tell us how the older the facility gets and the more maintenance that's required, the higher that number will go. And so that's kind of what I'm benchmarking against with the AWWA.
Okay. This is Scott. Thank you. Appreciate you following up on that.
Yes, sir. Apologize. I'm trying to get y'all to my presentation screen. All right. Can everybody see that?
Mhm.
Okay.
can.
So
Yeah.
very good. So this is the static well presentation for 2020 for the Woodlands Division. This is a carryover from last month. Like I said, y'all are the last MUD to receive this report. Just a reminder, the Woodlands has 38 groundwater wells within the Woodlands, 18 of which are in the Evangeline aquifer, 20 in the Jasper. Our static well measurements that we take are done twice a year, once in February coming out of the winter months, lower demand part of the year, and then again in October coming out of the summer months, our higher demand part of the year. This graphic is our Evangeline static well levels from 1990 to 2020. You can see a bunch of squiggly lines that run left to right, and then a darker blue line that crosses those squiggly lines. It's our groundwater usage. There's an inverse relationship there between the static well level and our groundwater pumpage. And you'll notice in 2015 or post 2015, that dark blue line drops off significantly and a red line comes off of that. And that is representation of the groundwater and surface water demand. This slide I borrowed from the USGS. Thought it provided a good illustration of what's going on. We have our Evangeline elevation change from 2015 to 2020. If you focus in on the southern portion of Montgomery County, you'll see some light blue and darker blue circles, and those represent rise in elevation in the Evangeline aquifer. This data is from 2015 to 2020. However, if you look at the data from 2019 to 2020, you'll notice that we start to see some orange and red circles, which represents a decline in elevation. So we've got a rise between 2015 and 2020, but looking just at 2019 to 2020, we're showing declines.
So Matt, would you mind putting your cursor on where Branch Crossing crosses Woodlands Parkway?
It is probably difficult on here. Can y'all see my cursor?
Yes.
No. Not really.
It's probably difficult to point out on, I have another map, Mr. Newman, on a further slide. That are you trying to represent PAM 68?
No, I'm just curious, is it that big circle there or the little circle to the left? One up to the northwest from where you are. There's a little circle, a little orange circle there.
Oh, right here.
Is that it?
That looks like it's probably more out around the 1488 area. It's probably a little more northwest from
I
the
see.
Woodlands.
Okay, good, thank you.
Yes, sir. So looking at the Jasper static well levels, same type graph as the Evangeline. we've got static well levels from 1990 to 2020. Again, similar looking graph. You have a inverse relationship between the static well levels and the groundwater. And again, we utilize some USGS data. And from 2015 to 2020, you see blue circles, which represents rise in elevation. But 2019 to 2020, we're seeing those red and orange looking circles, which represents a decline. So for both the Evangeline and the Jasper, the period of 2015 to 2020, we see rises, but in both aquifers for 2019 to 2020, we show declines. I think that'll make more sense in the next couple slides. So if we focus in on 2010 to 2020, and we've got a mixture of wells here, Upper Jasper and Evangeline, you'll see that we introduced surface water here in 2015 at a 65% blend rate. That's 65% surface water, 35% groundwater. You can see we start to see some rebounds. Moving ahead in time, we reduced the blend ratio to a 50-50 blend, and then due to budget constraints, reduced to 35%. During that period of time of a 50-50 blend, we've got relatively stable aquifer levels, but reducing to 35%, we see a little bit of a drop off there. So we've looked at our static well levels. We've looked at some USGS data. We also brought in some PAM site data. There's 3 PAM sites in the Woodlands, and PAM sites, basically, it's just a Porta measure, and it measures the land surface elevation. And with the PAM sites, the data is collected periodically. There's PAM 13, 68, and 69. PAM 13 is our oldest site. We have the most data on, so we like to benchmark against it. And here is a graphic that shows the PAM site data from 2000 to 2020. You can see on the left-hand side there, your vertical movement in centimeters. On the right-hand side, you got vertical movement in inches. So we narrow our focus in on this PAM site data, PAM 13 data, 2010 to 2020. And we've overlaid, you can see a downward trend right here in the years prior to 2015. But we overlay our surface water blend data, and we start to see some stable trends when we begin to deliver surface water. But then again, 35%, you can start to begin to kind of see a little bit of a downward trend.
And really last year you ran at what, 41%?
I believe so. We were a little above.
So it's kind of disappointing to see a downward trend. I was hoping that being in the around 40, you'd be almost imperceptible.
You're correct, Mr. Newman. It was 59-41 blend ratio.
This is Scott. In terms of interpreting the data on this draft, each dot is just a relative to the baseline, right? So meaning if I select that dot in 2020, that negative 10.7 that's relative to the baseline from time X whenever you started measuring.
I believe that's correct.
Okay.
Trying to think of the file data now. There's a lot of data behind.
Okay, but I could compare 2 dots and say, okay, from 18 to 9 to 20, it's like 0.3 drop or something, depending on the.
Yes, they're all relative to each other. Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Want to mention our core site installation. our core site is a continually operating reference station. The difference between a CORS and a PAM site is the amount of data collected. The core site collects data 24 hours a day, and this site is installed at Estuary's Lift Station 27 and was installed October 2020. A lot of partners involved in this: the Subsidence District, Woodlands Water, Estuary, Lone Star, Grogan's Mill Village Association, and Mr. Yours, MUD 36 director, was a huge part of coordinating this effort. So big thank you to him. And picture of Mr. Yours, myself, and Mr. Turco at the John Yours core site at Lift Station 27. And there's a map for reference of where Lift Station 27 is. With that, I've got a supplement to this. Mr. Custer had seen this at the trustees meeting and had some really good questions. And so we put some slides together to help address those questions. If you don't mind, I'll move forward and we can ask questions afterwards.
Sure, go ahead.
So Mr. Custer had some questions regarding, what do all these static well level measurements mean? What are the financial implications, if you will? And so in looking at the Evangeline static well levels, you can see here at approximately 600 feet, we have 2 wells that become dry, if you will. Replacement cost is approximately $6 million. That's in fiscal year 2020 cost. And then about 650 feet, 10 wells go dry, $30 million in capital cost to replace those wells. I'll note that those wells would probably be replaced with a Jasper Aquifer well. And then moving down to a 700 feet depth, 6 more wells would run dry, and it would be $18 million. In looking at the upper Jasper static well levels, same thing, we get to almost 500 feet, 8 wells would need to be lowered. So whereas in the Jasper, we're able to lower the wells, Evangeline, we're not able to do that. So we've got some room here to lower wells, but reworking those wells, those 8 wells would cost about $12 million. And then at a depth just over 600 feet, 9 wells would need to be lowered at a cost of $21 million. So that's some cost there for replacing or lowering. But we also, So well replacement here, just to give y'all guys a visual, this is my attempt at a well and shaft. And so you have your static well level, which is surface elevation to where the water level is relative to when the well is not running, if you will. And you have your drawdown, and we measure our available drawdown by using it's 50 feet above the pump and measuring that up to the drawdown. And so the remaining drawdown is the area of which you have to really, I guess, work within. And so looking at the Evangeline, 90% depletion of drawdown, 90% of remaining available drawdown, no well replacements, 80%, you're gonna have to replace 1, 73, so on and so forth. Same thing with the Jasper there. So impacts to the operations. This is an example of a 1500 GPM well with 552 feet of head. You can see here 552 feet ahead. When that static well level drops, your drawdown is more, and so it increases your head. And by increasing that head, you lose capacity, and so you're not able to produce as much. So that 1500 GPM well now turns into a 1000 GPM well with 802 feet ahead. And so, what does all that mean? Tried to break it down for you guys. I needed to have it broke down for myself. So your increased drawdown equals increased lift. And you got increased lift, it increases your head. And that increased head requires increased horsepower. And the increased horsepower is increased electrical cost. So in trying to calculate, okay, take a 100-foot decline scenario. We would need to increase horsepower by 87 horsepower. That 87 horsepower equals approximately 68 kilowatts. We took our average well run time and multiplied the additional kilowatts needed by the average well time, run time, came up with a new kilowatt per hour, and then took an average energy cost and calculated approximately $9,500 in addition in electrical costs per well. And so you can see year one, multiplying the 9,500 by 38 wells, it's a cost of $361,000. If you had another additional 100-foot decline in year two, be $722,000, so on and so forth.
Scott, that part's pretty linear, regardless of depth. It looks like.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Would you agree with that, Ron?
Um,
Sorry. I thought you were going to say something. I apologize.
No, it is depth. What he's showing is for each of those years, if it continues to decline an additional 100 feet. So by year one, you have declined a total of 100 feet. By year two, you have declined a total of 200 feet. By year three, you're a total of 300 feet.
Yeah, 10K. I mean, Scott, this is tough to explain to the general public, but a rough number of 10K per well per 100 feet is like an easy number to understand.
Right.
Yeah. And again, the average runtime was based on that 65% groundwater, 35% surface water blend ratio.
Okay.
So, and
So the
I'm sorry,
point-
go ahead.
There's three major points is as the aquifer drops, you're losing capacity. To make up for that capacity, you've got to get bigger motors on there. So that costs you more in power. Eventually it gets to the point where it drops so much you have to lower the well or replace the well. And so that's what the costs are associated.
With that concludes my presentation. I did want to point out, we've provided this information to our board, Woodlands Water trustees and the MUDs. Also presented this to Lone Star Groundwater Conservation District's Board of Directors on January 12th, GMA today. You can see some future dates there for upcoming meetings. We'll be presenting the static well level information. So just trying to get the word out there, make people aware. I won't be including the cost slides just because of like you said, Mr. Custer, it's kind of difficult to convey that. But the static well level information will be presented to these groups.
This is Scott. Yeah, I think you should, but it's hard to internalize as a resident what that really means. So your wells are dropping. Okay. Some people will be aware of subsidence. Most people know how much they're paying in a water bill. Yeah. I would really recommend that you consider taking on how you equate that to cost versus droppage for the typical water bill for a resident, particularly as you hit the village associations. One Water Task Force, I'm sure Bruce and crew will ask you that.
And I may pick your brain, Scott, on how to
Yeah,
put it more into living room language, I guess.
yeah, I'd be happy to help. Yeah.
Good.
It's not
'Cause
easy, I
think you're
agree,
right.
but
It's important to put some cost associated with it. I just didn't want to,
Yeah.
I don't want to lose the audience going over the.
well, they'll
cost
perk
slides.
right back up when they're like, okay, it's another, $5 a month or whatever, so.
Matt, I think you did a good job explaining that and kind of bringing it down and not making it so technical. I will tell you, I do appreciate you going to the village associations. What you're going to find is that they're going to be asking a lot of questions, probably not related to this, once you get into the room. So just a heads up.
I appreciate that.
They'll probably ask about drainage, and they're probably going to ask about water quality.
Okay.
And
I'm on
water
that-
main breaks.
Yeah, and water main breaks. I'm on that board for Sterling Ridge, so I'll be there.
Very good.
And I don't see you having down the Grogan's Mill Village Association on your 2B list.
You are correct. That one got cut off. I do have that. It's on there. That's one that we're still trying to coordinate with, but yes, that will be one that we definitely want to hit. So
Okay, just checking.
I think my table got cut off. I apologize.
I'm not sure that you have all these associations on here. I'm not sure you have Harper's Landing on here either. I'm not sure how they play into the picture, but I don't know how theirs works, but there is Harper's Landing up on 242.
Okay, we've gone through the township. Mr. Powers has helped us coordinate some of these meetings, and so I'll ask him about Harper's Landing.
Yeah.
Would they-
Yeah, because that's a whole separate entity up there since it's on the east side of I-45, but it is considered the town.
That's a good point. I appreciate that.
This is Scott, man, I appreciate you running those additional numbers. I'm grateful for that analysis. Thank you.
It was very beneficial for myself. Business background, having to dig more into the operation. So Ron and Chris were very helpful.
Do we have any other questions on this report?
Matt, did you have a chance to be able to flash up the PAM 68 data?
I do. I have that right here. Let me grab it. So just for reference, can y'all see this, guys?
Yes.
Mhm.
Okay. This is PAM 68, and it is located the west portion of the Woodlands at trying to think of the cross street now, Mr. Newman. Did I say Branch
You said
Crossing?
Branch Crossing, yes.
Branch Crossing.
You said behind Walmart.
Yeah, it looked from the aerial like it was kind of right behind the Walmart there. But this is PAM 68. What we showed earlier was PAM site 13. You can see that this data comes online mid 2011, and so the information is limited to that window, 2011 to 2020. But you can tells a pretty good story there. It's a pretty steady drop.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the impact is. It might be more on drainage or speed of drainage or shape of the land, but it happens to be at one of the highest spots in the woodlands. So I'm not sure what the impact is.
Yeah, I couldn't speak to that either, Mr. Newman.
Yeah, that's the $1 million question.
Right.
there is a fault over by Stony, what is it? Stonyhurst?
Stonehurst?
Yeah, Stonehurst. Don't know what the impact is there.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I appreciate y'all's time this evening.
Hey, thank you for all that information.
Yes, ma'am.
Sounds really good. Hey, on number 16, we have the goals for Med 46. George, you had addressed this at the last meeting. So do you want to take the lead on this?
Sure. I've been in several organizations, both volunteer organizations and company organizations. And, I got to thinking about it that, so many of them have gone through a goals exercise, and they've done it, especially on the commercial side, they've done it by go through the determination of mission and vision, and then how do you have objectives and goals to obtain those. And we haven't done any of that. And I guess I was thinking that today be sort of a brainstorming session, and maybe gloss over some of that prep work and really just see if there's around the table kind of discussion on what we would think would be goals that we'd want to work on. And so my objective was to hear what y'all have to say. I have a couple of ideas, but I'd like to hear what y'all have.
This is Scott. I recommend you kick us off and get us brainstorming.
Okay, so and by kick off, I assume you want an example.
Yes.
So one example could be, we had this symposium that some of us went to back in October that HARC arranged. It's the annual Gulf Coast Water Conservation Symposium. There were several cities that gave examples of how they had done water reduction. They did things like stormwater capture. Some of the cities like Sugar Land spent a lot of time monitoring who were the big consumers of water and how could their water be supplemented with, for example, purple water. So one example that I'd give would be, can we determine if any out-of-the-box type projects can be utilized here for water reduction or water replacement? So I'd put that out as a goal. It would take some discussion at multiple meetings over the year. So that was one example. We had spent some time last year working on improving transparency. And when I was out talking to people last year, in meeting with different groups, there was desire to hear or desire for us to do more. And so I would recommend a goal to improve transparency, to try and meet some of the expectations of our residents.
What kind of expectations, George, do they have? I don't know what you're talking about. I'm not
Okay.
really clear.
Well, I know Deidre and Scott have some ideas there, but one example is today we're in a Zoom meeting.
Uh-huh.
The Zoom meeting's being recorded. If you want to see, say you'd missed the meeting, you want to go see it tonight or later on, the only way you can get to it is to call Shelley and ask her for a copy.
Mm-hmm.
People would like to be able to just access that directly off the webpage.
Yeah, this is Scott. I just, my viewpoint, I'm not, it's probably obvious. That's just, to me, that's standard operating procedure. That should be slam dunk easy to get the video of a meeting. It should be very easy to get the documentation. I do not accuse staff or anyone else of having the intention of hiding information from the public. That's clearly not the intent. In fact, I've heard the opposite. It's like, we don't want to confuse the public unnecessarily. But, this day and age, I think these meetings, the minutes, the decisions, the documentation should just be super easy to grab. Live feeds, if they want to watch during, super easy. I think we could do better there.
Okay, what else is on the list? We've got two, the Heart Seminar with the water reduction and consumers, and then transparency of Zoom meetings. What else?
One observation I have is that I would like to see improved communications to MUD directors. And so, for example, back, I think it was November, there was a requirement that MUD 46 provide a submission to the EPA for risk assessment. And at that time, we asked to see what it was that the staff submitted to the EPA. That type of information should flow to us without asking. I'd like to see better update on projects. For example, we've had a major project underway for more than a year to do ditch repair. At this moment, we don't know what the status is of it, what percent complete it is, how much has been spent, which contractor was selected, how was the contractor selected, and the list can go on. I'd like to see better information on project work coming to the MUD routinely. I see the SJRA provides us detailed information on projects they're doing, and it's to the point where it's almost too much information, but they are excellent at giving status of projects and what they're working on and how it's going.
Mark Vonderow here. Maybe we need to have a special meeting or two, and your list is growing, so maybe we need to have a special meeting and get all this on paper. And you said you've already talked to Deidre and Scott.
No, I haven't talked to Deidre and Scott about that. I had met Deidre at one of the Sterling Ridge meetings, and at that time, transparency came out.
This is Scott. I want to be super clear. We have not discussed that offline.
Okay.
Okay, that's good.
Violation.
No, we have not had any conversation about this in preparation for the meeting.
That's good. All right.
I'm on the board for Sterling Ridge Village Association, and they at those board meetings, I think that a lot of people just don't understand how the Woodlands works. They don't understand the hierarchy or how all the agencies work together, which is understandable. It's not an easy system. It's not like a town or a city. The only other suggestions that I would like, Mark's suggestion of a special meeting, I think that this subject requires further discussion dedicated to this. The only thing that I would like to say is, as far as communication efforts, I really like the Twitter feed. I like that when lines go down, service is disrupted. I always go to Twitter and I see that tweet come out, and I know. So maybe just increasing, I don't know who does the Twitter for Woodlands Water, but maybe increasing the tweets, maybe saying, hey, board meetings are coming up. These are the times. This is how you access it. Just those kinds of things as far as communication.
They also do Facebook. I get everything off of Facebook. So if they have like a line go down, this is Margie, they are put it on Facebook pretty quick so that, there's, when they've been cutting into these lines, different contractors when they're trying to put stuff in lately. So the Facebook has been very effective as well.
The reason why I say Twitter and not Facebook is because I can set alerts on Twitter. And my Facebook, I may not see Woodlands Water on my feed. So
I don't know how many people are using Twitter. That would be the interesting thing to find out.
Yeah, this Scott, in a perfect world, it goes out on all the channels and people can pick their channel of choice. I wonder, as a suggestion, because I think some of these are probably non-controversial, and it might be like if Jim or whomever he designated collected some ideas from either George, whomever, there could be some things that could be received as suggestions that wouldn't necessarily take board action to implement. Just as an idea, with respect to, my commentary on meeting content, availability, video, et cetera, I think we should consider that we may want to benchmark against other online entities like the township or, I hate to say it, but Lone Star Groundwater, in terms of the information they have online versus what we
You
have
could
online
use the
for the public
county commission
or county. And so I would score us as way behind the other public entities. We're compliant with the law, et cetera, et cetera. But in terms of just ease of access, I would score us very, very poor.
I would say add to that, Scott, though, I think a lot of entities have stepped it up since COVID. A lot of these places did not have Zoom accessibility. They didn't have their packages online. So all of that just occurred when meetings couldn't be had face to face. I've just noticed an increase in the past year.
Mm-hmm. I agree with you, Deidre.
Do they allow dinosaurs on Twitter?
You can have whoever you want on Twitter.
They can set a password, yes.
I have a Twitter tutor, or maybe, I don't know, maybe I can get my wife to help me.
I'll tutor you, Mark.
I really think, I really think we all need to, I was gonna say get in the same room, but we all need to have a special meeting. So, and let's air this out. I know some of y'all work and that's a problem in scheduling, but I don't have anything against anything that I heard concerning all this, but I think we all need to get together and let's make it happen.
I think that's a great idea. I agree with that.
So
Mark, I would have said TikTok, but I'm not doing any dancing.
okay. Well, I like you say you're not doing any dancing.
This Scott, you got to know what TikTok is to start with.
All I see is TikTok commercials on TV, and I don't know. Every now and then, the younger crowd will get me hooked into something, and if so, anyway.
Let me offer if
come on.
You want to consider a special meeting. We've certainly got what was discussed tonight on record, but I would invite all the directors to send us in a list of their suggestions, and we can then put that together in the form of an agenda to go out and then have.
That'd be good.
Okay.
I think that sounds great, Jim. That would be great. The ones I just wrote down were the park seminar with water reduction and consumers, transparency of Zoom meetings, better communication to Med 46 directors, the status of projects with ditch repair and contractors, and then Twitter feeds, Facebook, and to look more like the county commissioners or other online entities. So That's kind of a revisit of what we just said. And then thanks, Craig. When would we have the meeting? That's what I don't know, when y'all want to have a meeting. I don't know.
Well, we don't have to set that today. Once we get the information, we can have Shelley send out some options for a meeting date.
Okay,
I'm looking at the time today and we've got quite a few.
I know.
things
We got to
cover
finish
going
up on this.
forward. I don't want to,
Yeah,
because we do have to drop off at 6 for the other meeting.
okay, let's move on then, and we'll table that for right now, if that's okay with everybody. We're on number 17 then on our agenda, and it's receive the attorney's report.
This is Brian. In the interest of time, I'll go ahead and just defer on the minor discussion about the legislature. They started, but nothing significant to report as of yet.
Okay. Number 18, the status of issuance of the district's unlimited tax refunding, Series 2021.
Hey, good evening. Hopefully you've seen the quick presentation. I'll be really quick. Let's see if I can pull it up. Just in the interest of time, you can see that the current rate of the bond buyer index is 2.21. The 30-year average is still at 4.73. You can look at the bottom. We still refunded your 22 through 30 maturities in the amount of $17,650,000. If you look on the next page, this page right here, this is probably the most informative page. You can see how it trended. Your refunded par is the amount that you're calling, the 17.65. You only have to sell 15.46. And so you're seeing principal savings there. And down below, you can see your average annual savings at just over $219,000. And the PV savings as a percentage of your refunded par is 11.67. And if you recall back in December, it was right around 11.38. So it came in slightly better than where the market was in December. Moving on to the next page, this is just a breakdown of the 17.65. You'll notice the coupons anywhere from 3 to 5%. Here, you'll notice this was the pricing scale that went out to the market. You can see the rate is 4%. So there's two sides to savings when you look at a refunding. It's either interest savings or principal savings or a combination of the two. Majority of the savings here came from your principal savings. And then lastly, this is your outstanding debt profile, went from 79.98 million to 77.7 million. And if you look all the way to the right, your savings is 2.19 million. And what that translates to, a penny in your district is about $357,000. So it comes out to be about 0.6 pennies. So a little over a half a penny in savings due to the transaction. And here is just a breakdown of your sources and uses. I ran through that really quickly. It was a very successful refunding, but I'm happy to answer any questions or anything you have to throw at me now.
Any questions from anybody? No?
Are you ready to do another one?
It'll be, I think 2022 is the next time. So at that point, depending on the district's financials, if you can pay down some with cash, you can do that. Otherwise, if there is an opportunity, we'll absolutely present it to the board.
Okay.
This is Scott. So 219K in savings could be wiped out by 55 feet or so of well depth in electric.
Got that right.
So there you go.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Adam, for all your hard work on that. We really appreciate
Absolutely.
it. Yeah, thank you. Okay, now we're on number 19. Receive information on the SJRA Phase 2 Spring Creek Flood Control.
Being considered by Water Development Board on the January 28th meeting.
January 28th. Okay. Thank you. Number 20, receive the general manager's report. Jim?
Thank you. First of all, I want to report that Matt Corley made a presentation to the trustees regarding the 6th and final grant accounting, a summary of that process and kind of a path going forward. I thought that was very good information that should be shared with all of our directors and our MUDs. We didn't get it on your agendas for this month, but look forward to that being an agenda item on each of our MUDs next month with the report in the packet for us to go through that information.
Okay.
At the trustee meeting, there was a lengthy discussion regarding the concept of wastewater treatment consolidation. The committee Finance Audit Committee that's been working with the SJRA staff and our staff had a meeting a few days before the trustee meeting. The topics discussed at that meeting were impacts to the retail sewer rate if consolidation goes through and what that looks like. We also talked about setting up a scope of work, defining the scope of work for a feasibility study, the timing of that feasibility study, public outreach, public engagement regarding that concept of centralizing wastewater treatment. Out of that meeting, the committee had several items they wanted more information on, so we're going to do a follow-up meeting, and the plan is to have all that information ready to present to the trustees in February. Ron Kelling reported that the summary judgment, the favorable summary judgment ruling in Travis County with their lawsuit against Conroe was appealed by Conroe, and they made a unique appeal. They're asking that appeal skip the typical appellate court process and go straight to the Supreme Court. So more to come on that. Yeah, interesting. We talked about the Sunset Commission report and their directive for SJRA to do more public outreach and public engagement and what that might look like. As an example, we're working on a flyer that will go out that talks about how the GRP rates and the GRP budget is established, how the Woodlands Division wholesale sewer rates and water rates are established in that process. So the public will get informed, if you will, on the various meetings and the effort that goes into that process. So a lot of that component of that is our trustee meetings and MUD review meetings. So talking about more transparency and more communication with our customers, there's an example that's being worked on with the River Authority. And President Eric Hurd has appointed an ad hoc committee to work with our staff and their staff to kind of see what that looks like going forward. So you will be seeing more communication to the residents, especially regarding the River Authority process.
Okay.
In your packet is a monthly summary from HARC on our engagement with them regarding groundwater studies. If you've got questions on that, I'll try to address those. We have quarterly meetings where we all get together as a consortium, but I've asked HARC to also give us monthly reports on their activity. So that's what's in your budget, in your packet. At the trustee meeting, we had a gentleman report to the trustees that he was unhappy with the pole construction for the AMI project. We've had one other resident call in and complain about their I guess, the aesthetics of the pole and the visual impacts that they think it's had on their property value. I told the trustees that I'd be meeting with these individuals and report back at the February meeting on their concerns and what ideas we may have that could address those. I feel like it's important to let you know that I did have a conversation last night with our representative with Amoresco, who has put in many projects like this across the state of Texas, has installed hundreds of poles associated with those, and he has never once had a resident complain about the aesthetics of a pole. This was new to him. We did not consider it, honestly, in our review process. So the Woodlands is unique. They're the first to have customers complain about how the poles look. So we'll be working through that challenge. There is a subsidence webinar that's going to be hosted by Intera. The flyer is in your packet. It's the end of this month. Intera is a very well-respected geoscience, geotechnical firm. I would recommend you try to sign up for that if you can. Also in your packet was a copy of what we call a content agreement. This is a template that's been used over the years to formalize the relationship between a MUD and a developer, usually the Woodlands Development Company, on putting infrastructure in and then being reimbursed for that through bond proceeds from the MUD district. We've had a couple of requests to look at that agreement, maybe tweak it some. So Brian and I will be looking at it with our staff and others and bringing it back to the trustees for some discussion next month and then maybe presenting it to all the MUDs also for adjustment. So that concludes my report and I'm available for questions.
Mark Vonderow here. Who made the request for the contents?
Yeah, I'd like to know that too.
Who's kicking that ball down the road?
I think if I recall, Hartley McIntosh and Laura Norton, a new director of MUD, didn't know what it was, had never seen one. So some of the newer directors and the MUDs that haven't seen a lot of activity really are not familiar with the content agreement in that document. So that's what stimulated that discussion.
That's
But
good.
Jim, what more building is there to be done? Because those contents go with the building, so.
Yeah, as we get closer to build out, there's less and less of that. And again, the content was set up as a document to formalize a relationship between the developer and the MUD for bond proceeds to reimburse. So
Exactly.
as some of the MUDs have gotten more cash, more reserves, they've paid out of cash and not sold bonds. So, you know, we're going to be looking at it, and you've got the document. If you think you see something in there that maybe we should look at tweaking, let me know.
Okay.
Interesting. Okay.
This
Were
is
there any
Scott.
other
I think it was also Trustee Martin who said the document's really old. Do we need to look at it again? I think that's where it also came from.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, Margie, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Maybe that is why it came up. I don't know. It's just, we've had the same document for years. So maybe that's what did cause that. I don't know. Okay, go on then. Does anybody have any other questions for Jim? Okay, we're gonna go on to number 21. Consider an act on supporting Dr. Neil Gaynor, MUD 6, and Stephanie Zertuche as an alternate, MUD 7, as voting members to the Texas Water Development Board, San Jacinto River Basin Regional Planning Group.
I'll try to make a very long story short. Our first attempt to get one of our directors seated at that planning group was unsuccessful. We were far outnumbered in the water district category by MUDs in Harris County, Fort Bend County, and others. So a number of our leaders felt like Montgomery County was underrepresented in this group and have been lobbying with this planning group to get additional voting members. Neil has been a great part of that. I think Stephanie has, several other MUD directors, township directors. So it's been brought up for discussion. It was discussed at their meeting last week. It did not pass, but we think it's going to come up again in February. And this is kind of a proactive effort on our part. So if and when a new voting member is selected that is in a category that might fit us, like water districts, we want to have the documentation in place to recommend to as a group who could be on that and represent Montgomery County. So this is an effort to be proactive and get them in front of that group.
So it looks like we need to have a vote on that we would support these people. Is that what
That
we're
is
doing?
correct. Yes.
Okay. So do we have anyone to make the motion that we would support Dr. Neil Gaynor and Stephanie Zertuche?
I'll make that motion.
Okay, George makes the motion. Do we have a second?
Mark Vonderow, second.
Okay, I'll call the roll. Mark, how do you vote?
Aye.
Margie votes aye. Scott, how do you vote?
Aye.
Deirdre, how do you vote?
Aye.
And George, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. We're on number 22, approve a resolution authorizing the submittal of the 2021 Water Smart application.
This is
I
my,
think,
this is
yeah, go ahead, Mike.
an annual exercise we do every January. The submittal is due March 1st. What it is, for those that are not familiar with it, it's the Association of Water Board Directors, Texas, has a Water Smart partnership. It promotes water conservation, water use efficiencies, and so forth. We've been a member since 2005, so this will be our 16th year. Doesn't cost anything to join, or doesn't cost anything for the application, just a little bit of my time. There's no fees, there's no cost associated with any of it. But this year is a little different. They do want a signed resolution by the board authorizing the Water Smart submittal, and they also want to copy the minutes where the board discussed the submittal. For example, these minutes tonight.
Okay,
The submittal. So your approval, I would like to get your approval, and I will complete the application.
okay. So we need a motion then to approve a resolution authorizing the Water Smart application. Does
Mark
anyone want?
Monroe, I'll make the motion.
Okay, this is Margie. I'll second. I'll call down the list. Mark, how do you vote?
Aye.
Margie votes aye. Deidre, how do you vote?
Aye.
George, how do you vote?
Aye.
Scott, how do you vote?
Aye.
Okay, the motion passes. Thank you so much for doing that. We really appreciate it. Okay, number 23, receive the Woodlands Water Trustees report. Scott, you have anything
Yeah.
else?
This is Scott. The only comments I'll add, I'll try to let you know how votes go and if I'm with or not with the trustee board. There were only 3 votes. They were all just procedural. I was with the board there. Some of the public comments, they are in the document, but a couple of note. One resident said, interest rates are really cheap. You all need to go into more debt and fix all your infrastructure. Another resident said, hey, you should be more disciplined on paying off all your debt before you do anything else. And then there was another resident who complained about the water treatment plant number 1 and was shocked that it's 40 years old and boy, that needs to be fixed. The one piece that was somewhat
Water treatment or wastewater treatment?
forgive me, wastewater treatment. The one controversial area, I'll admit to probably making this controversial somewhat, was the discussion on Tin Man, which is one of the engineering replacement mechanisms on that wastewater treatment plant to reduce the odor. And there was a fan added to that engineering procedural document and increased the cost over 130K baseline to an additional 67K. Correct me if I'm wrong. And so I did request that we get a more regular review on costs because I didn't want that just to be a procedural yes. Wanted to know the reasons why and did it make sense financially, ROI, et cetera. So there'll be more discussion about that next week. And Trustee Martin also added to that because the schedule shifted out somewhat. So I think we'll get more regular reports on the progress of that, the engineering efforts on that plant. Nothing else to add.
Okay. And no one signed on at the beginning of the meeting for any development contracts. So we don't have Richard or anyone on the meeting. So I think there's nobody to address number 24. So do we have any matters for placement on future agenda? We know we're going to have a follow-up to the goals for the year.
Yeah, this is Scott. The one thing I'll say, I don't think it's coming up soon, but I just want to, I guess, for the record, ensure that we consider a tax reduction to be associated with the benefits that we just gained from the bond work that Adam did for us. So at some point, I guess in line with our normal budgetary process, but just like us to consider that.
Understood, Scott. I just want to remind if we can get your written suggestions or comments on goals, then we'll establish a follow-up meeting if that's what the board would like, to have that single agenda item or that item discussed.
So you'd like to have that go to Shelley or to you?
To Shelley, please.
And do we have a deadline for that? Should we put a deadline on that then, so everybody gets theirs turned in? I mean, do you want to say by the end of the week, or do you want to, I mean, I don't know how fast y'all want to work.
I'll let the board establish that.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll just say as soon as possible to get your list in so that we can go ahead and address all the things everybody had on the list.
Yeah, I would say within at least a week or two, if you know,
Okay.
don't drag it on beyond that.
No, I think a week is good at the latest. Yeah, I agree with you on that. Okay. Is there any other things we need to talk about or discuss? No. Okay. Well, I think that's for the agenda. Then we're finished with our agenda. And thank you, everybody, for being on the call.
Thank you all.
Hi, everybody.
Deirdre,
you.
before you go, there is a few papers that you could sign. I went by and signed some papers today, and there's a few papers for you to sign as the secretary.
I signed a bunch of papers. I just went in this.
I know when I was going through them, though, I see your name needs to be on a few more for a few more things. So, and there's one paper there that I had to leave a question for Shelley on because they wanted the secretary, but it was back to October and you weren't elected till November. So I put a note on that paper for her, just so you know.
I'll contact Shelley because I went in
Yeah.
last week and signed a ton of papers. So
I know. Okay. I was by there today, so I just was looking at through the pile. Okay. Okay. Thank you. Bye.